as humans have experienced, I guess. Why don't you give us a little backdrop? I mean, I was reading your book about it, and it kind of helped fill me in, and I took some notes on it. You know, there was an interesting history on it. The gentleman who actually discovered that the transit even existed, Horrocks, is that how you pronounce his name?
That's right, Jeremiah Horrocks, yes. Yes.
Horrocks in 1639. I mean, what was the story behind that guy and how he...
it was amazing. He was a kid. He was 18, 19 years old, brilliant, you know, coming from not a noble family. And by his own brain power, he was able to get into one of the top schools there, and on his own. And this was before calculus was even invented, so he couldn't use that. He... or discovered. I don't know whether you'd say it was discovered or invented. I don't know what would be the correct word there. But he realized that there'd be a transit of Venus and realized that it would be visible from England. And darn it, he and a friend viewed it and became thereby the first people in the world to have ever seen it. And his friend, I think Crabtree was his last name, his friend, to his horror, Jeremiah Horrocks, died at age 21 of unknown causes, just suddenly died. Nobody could figure out what was going on. And so his friend Crabtree became the only one in the world to have seen a transit then for the rest of his long life. Very strange situation. And then Edmund Halley of comet fame realized that a transit of Venus could pin down the distance to the sun and to Venus. And we didn't know how far the sun was. We didn't know the distances within the solar system. But by using parallax, we could figure it out with a transit of Venus. And so Edmund Halley realized that in the middle of the 18th century, there would be 2 transits. And sounded the alarm probably 50 years, 45 years before the first of them. And people listened to him. And so a dozen governments launched transit expeditions around the world. And their adventures were amazing, too. You had a Frenchman from a French team who got to India. His job was to get to India, and he was late because of passport, visa difficulties, and he arrived when the transit was already over. So he stayed in India 8 years, because there'd be another one in 8 years, to see the next transit. And you know what happened? There was an early monsoon, and he got clouded out of that transit. And so, despondent, he returned home to France to find that his heirs had taken all of his possessions because they thought he was dead. So there were some pretty horrible stories, transit stories, but there were also some great success stories as people sledged and walked and hiked and took mules and boats and went all over the world to try to find the magical number of the distance to the sun. Well, we all know now it's 93 million miles. It was actually the first million-dollar question on the TV show Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. Those of us who were into science couldn't believe that the first million-dollar question was that easy. What is, and they gave them 4 choices, 4 multiple-choice questions. What is the distance to the sun? But back then, nobody knew, and everybody would have spent a fortune to find out that it was 93 million miles, and that's what transits told us.
That's interesting stuff. You know, we're what I'm going to do now, if anyone's in the chat room of Slooh.com, I'm going to, if you have any questions you would like to ask Bob or Duncan, please post them, and I'll try to relay them over to Bob and Duncan as we go through here. So I think one of the interesting parts of this, Bob, is the timing of these. You know, this is only the 7th transit, and the next one, I guess, isn't going to be around happening until 2000 or 2117. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. That's correct. They have a very odd cycle, Pat. Duncan knows this quite well, that because of a strange coincidence, that is, Earth orbits the Sun 8 times. In that interval, Venus orbits the Sun exactly 13 times, minus 2 days. So that once a transit happens, you'll get another one 8 years later. But then, the next 8 years, it slightly misses it. And we'll talk later about why transits don't happen every time Venus passes in front between us and the Sun, which is every 225 days, but are so rare. So we miss the exact alignment. We have to wait 105.5 years. But then there's another one in 8 years, Then you have to wait 121 and a half, then 8, then 105 and a half, then 8, then 121 and a half, then 8, then 105 and a half, and that's the cycle. Over and over again, it's going to continue for at least another 1,500 years. They always happen in June or December, and that's the rhythm forever. So now we've finished the 8-year period. We had one in 2004, and now we enter the 105.5-year period. And so I'm glad we're enjoying it today because, 30 years from now, Duncan's a young guy here. 30 years from now, he's going to tell his friends and his kids, hey, remember that transit back in 2012? And there's always going to be a few people who say, well, I slept, I missed it, I didn't see it. And they're going to feel awful. They're going to feel pretty bad because you're not going to get another chance at this.
Well, I'm glad that I got to see it on Slooh. Because it's going to save me getting up at 5 in the morning. And I tell you, it's rained all day here today in London. So the chances of a clear sky tomorrow morning aren't that great. So you're
Really? It's rained in London? No.
Yeah, exactly. Jeez, big surprise, Duncan. Big surprise. So, Duncan, before you have to go, do you have any final thoughts about this particular event or anything you want to add?
No, I mean, just the fact that, Slooh's doing this is fantastic. And like I say, I always seem to be up around about midnight for these Slooh events. And it's wonderful that we can turn to somewhere that allows us to see these things happening. And I wouldn't have been able to see this had Slooh not been able to have these feeds. So I think we're really groundbreaking now. And I think that technology has come so far that astronomy is a global thing, and it's something that we can all take part in, and it just makes it so much more fun. And being able to sit here in the comfort of my study and see the planet that I know so well. I spent 4 years studying Venus for my PhD, and to see it sort of cross the surface of the sun is a wonderful thing, and it's great to be able to do so.
Well, if that's the case, Duncan, and I had forgotten that was your PhD thesis, and I remember that now. Could you tell us some of your favorite facts about Venus, then?
Well, yeah, I mean, we did a little bit of this earlier. I mean, it really is a bizarre planet. I mean, most planets in the solar system, they rotate counterclockwise, okay? Venus doesn't. It's got something called a retrograde rotation. So it appears to rotate backwards. So if you could see the sun on the surface of Venus, which of course you can't because it's totally enveloped by this thick, choking, poisonous cloud, the sun would rise in the west and set in the east. It would do the opposite as it does on our planet. And the other thing is, a day on Venus lasts longer than its year. It actually takes Venus something like, I think it's 243 days to just take one rotation, Earth days to take one rotation. So days on Venus lasts forever. It actually takes the planet 224 days to go around the sun. So if you think about it, a day on Venus lasts longer than its year. Bizarre.
So what does that do to the number of birthdays in a year?
I don't know. Do you get younger? How does that work? It could be a Benjamin Button type thing going on there. I don't know. But no, it was a fascinating planet. I mean, we were really lucky because when we had the Magellan data coming in back in the early 90s when I was researching, we were some of the first people to see these images, these radar images that were able to penetrate the cloud and show us what the surface looked like for the first time, and they were in exquisite detail. And I remember when I was working at the University of London, we'd roll out these big photographs of the surface. They were like big photographs, and they were a good size, a couple of feet by a couple of feet, and you pour over them, and for the first time, we were getting a really, really detailed view of what that surface was, and it was just littered with volcanoes and volcanism. Everywhere you looked, peppered with volcanoes. So, really geology gone wild on Venus, and it was a lot of fun to try and unravel that.
Now, speaking of that, I have a question for you. As I understand it, something is deposited by these, by the clouds, perhaps, or volcanoes, onto the sides of mountains. It's almost, some thought it might be a snow of a form of lead. Others thought it was a different kind of white substance. What's that all about?
That's right. Yes, one of the instruments on board the Magellan spacecraft was looking at reflectivity, and what it noticed is the caps, the tops of some of the high volcanoes were very strongly reflecting, and that was a bit of a puzzle. In fact, still is a bit of a puzzle as far as I know. Now, nobody at the time was really sure what it was. Now, it could be a mineral deposit that's on the sides of those volcanoes. Remember, volcanoes throw out lava. They also throw out a lot of other things, gases and things we call volatiles. And that may just cause a crust, cause a deposit on the tops of those volcanoes. And that was one of the ideas that was put forward at the time. I'm sure it's advanced. It was a good 20 years ago that I did my research, and I know things move along pretty rapidly these days, but that's what I remember about that. And it'd be interesting to hear, actually. I think we've got a JPL scientist who's coming on later on the broadcast who works specifically in the area of Venus. Be interested to ask him and find out a little more about that.
Okay, we'll wake you up when he comes on.
Send me an email.
Yes, we will. I'll be the first to call you, Duncan. So Duncan,
I would like to know. It was one of those mysteries at the time. I mean, there were a lot of mysteries. There were so many different geological features there that, nobody had ever seen them before. We didn't know what to call them, so we called them pancakes because they look like pancakes. We called them ticks because they look like the little ticks, little animals you get. One of my friends called a thing he was mapping in his area the scorpion feature because it looked like a scorpion. It's one of those very endearing sort of basic human instincts when you see something but you don't know what it is. You just sort of think, it looks like a pancake. So the name stuck, and pancake domes were these particular forms of volcanic domes that you see on Venus. Quite unique.
So, well, Duncan, I appreciate you coming in. I know it's late there. It's great to have you on these events. And
Always a pleasure, Pat.
I will keep you updated on our schedule. For those of you who don't know, we do these events almost weekly, different subjects, different topics, different galaxies, nebulas, comets. Slooh's not all about just the big whoppers that happen in the night sky. We also do a lot of different things. And Duncan and I, in fact, did one a week and a half ago on the anniversary of the JFK's moon speech, and we had an Apollo engineer on. And it was a really fascinating look into what they went through as they built the rockets that went up to the moon. So it was fun to do, and Duncan, I'm hoping we can do a lot more of those over the coming of this year. So I'll keep in touch with you, and we'll work something out on the future shows.
Great. Well, lovely to talk to you, Bob, and always good to talk to you, Pat. So
Thanks, Duncan.
Have a great day, and I look forward to catching up with you again. Take care now.
Okay. Good night.
All right, Duncan. Take care. Good night.
Bye-bye.
So,
Bye-bye.
Bob, our next guest, I'm going to be inviting in about 15 minutes. We're going to have an individual, Dave Mosher, who is a science journalist. He'll be joining us. He's a freelancer for Wired and for National Geographic News, Popular Mechanics, Technologist, Scientific American, and other popular science outlets. So we're going to have him on. He's written some interesting articles just recently, which I think will be fun to talk about as we experience the transit live here on Slooh.com. If you don't know much about Slooh, we actually have a membership program where you have the opportunity as a member to control high-powered observatories, specifically in the Canary Islands. And today we're running a special promo, believe it or not, with a partnership with Meade Telescope. If you become a yearly or a 2-year membership to Slooh, you will get a free entry-level telescope. And if you want to learn more about that promotion, there's actually on the homepage there's a video produced by Slooh engineer Paul Cox that kind of goes through what the telescope's all about, its capabilities, as well as part of your Slooh memberships. So please consider joining. It does help fund our live programming. If you can't join, please consider a feed rolling in.
No, you know what I'm
live.
going to do, though? I'm going to see this on the big screen, because right now I'm going to walk out and check on our group here. We've got a group at Mohonk Mountain House, this gorgeous National Historic Site, the voted #2 in the world of all resorts and hotels in the entire world, voted #2 by Condé Nast. This is a new development, and I'm going to go out now and take a look.
Okay, no problem. That'd be great. I'm going to look at some other feeds as we got here.
Our group of people right now.
I'm checking out the different feeds that we have on Slooh. We got Norway, Australia, and Prescott. So we've got some really interesting looks right now. Whoa! If you go to the guys, go to the Arizona feed, the Prescott. I'm going to pin this photo really quick. This thing's awesome. It's Matt from Arizona just put up a nice shot he just took of the transit in progress. So as Bob's getting situated here, I'm going to invite in Dave here shortly. I'm multitasking, as you can see. Let me just tweet this out really quick. So here you go. Bob, I think I'm getting some feedback from you. Is that you? I might have to turn off the audio here. Hold on. Did someone come in? Bob, is that you? Sorry, guys. Let me just see here.
Pat, can you hear me?
Yeah, you might have feedback issues. Matt, you're in, but you're feedbacking on us, I think.
I don't think it's me. I had my microphone off the whole time. I just turned it on, and I'm not hearing the feedback now. Are
okay,
you?
I turned Bob off, so we're good. So yeah, man, I just got a glimpse of your Prescott feed here. It's awesome. So I just tweeted it out. So are we all? How are things going on your side? You're a little stressed out right now?
No, I'm fine. It's just, I just have to log out of Google to capture more video. It just, it's too taxing on my computer, apparently. So anyway, I'm just going to be going in and out, and that's how I'll be as I upload feeds.
No problem, buddy. Jump in anytime you want. You're always invited. I'm just going to do a quick download here. I'm multitasking as we speak. We've got several feeds from all over the world. They'll be coming in and out depending on the time zones. So right now, if you are just coming in, we're highlighting the University of New Mexico's feed. We also got a great feed coming out of Norway. You can see the Broome, Australia feed. Wow, there's a nice one. You got a really nice close-up coming in that I'm going to pin. Is someone else? Paul, are you in here by chance?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, why don't you give us a quick update? Yeah, we can hear you. If you wouldn't mind, give a quick update while I'm pinning out
we've got, as you just said, we've got the Broome Australia feed coming in. That's Anthony Wesley. He's doing a fantastic job. He was kind of waiting for the sun to come up before his images started. He could start imaging. I'm just trying to sort out one of the feeds from Hawaii, because I've just heard from Freddie Willems down there that he is uploading images, but they're not actually getting through. So I'm just going to kind of take 5 minutes and take a look, see if we can get him online.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. I appreciate that. I'm going to be sending out. I'm sending out some photos to the social networks so people can check them out. If you're listening to this on the YouTube channel G+, we'll continually try to give you a feed into the Hangout as well as we work through this. And I am. What do we got here?
Hey,
who's there?
It's
Oh,
me.
Bob's
I'm
back. Okay, Bob. Thank you, buddy. Thank you. Leaving me hanging.
I checked on the group. What I did was I went back and checked on a group of people who caught the sun for a moment. There was a clearing, and people were getting to see the transit live from here in upstate New York.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. So
they also have a giant. They have a giant screen in front of them. They're also watching your Slooh coverage at the same time.
Oh, they are. Very nice. Very nice. Well, I hope someone. They should get to the. I've got. They should see on the Slooh homepage. They should see. I've got your feed in the main or the AZ Matt's webcast feed going right now, showing the red sun. So it's kind of neat as we speak. So Bob, tell us more about the significance of the transit I think, people are going to come in here all day long. So while I'm going to invite our next guest in about 5 minutes, before he gets on, why don't you give us a little recap of what's so significant about the Transit of Venus event and why astronomers and scientists are so fired up about this particular event?
It's two reasons. One, even though it doesn't help us these days at figuring out the sun's distance, because we've already nailed it down, Pat, it was so important throughout history, throughout the 18th century and 19th century. Each transit produced at least a dozen expensive global cooperative expeditions around the world to observe them and to time them precisely. So it was the most important possible celestial event for centuries. And so we still have a warm place in our hearts for it, even though the information we were seeking, which is the precise distance to the sun and the planets, we've got that now. So a transit is less important. But number two, it's so rare. The fact that there will not be another for another 105.5 years means, and the fact that we're seeing the clockwork mechanism of the solar system. There is Venus, just as predicted, marching across the face of the sun, taking 6 hours to do so. As we look at Venus's night hemisphere, it looks black not just because we're seeing it in front of the brilliant sun, but also because we're seeing the nighttime side of it. And
right.
Most of us recall how beautiful Venus has been throughout this spring. Throughout the late winter into early spring, it was the dominant thing in the sky. It produced more UFO reports than anything else. It could be seen even from light-polluted cities like yours, Pat. It was just brilliant.
My city's more than just light-polluted, Bob. It's more than just light-polluted. LA is a little bit of both, I would have to say. So go ahead, though.
And so from the brilliant evening star, now it transforms itself into an inky black, just the opposite, from being the brightest thing in the sky after the moon to being this inky black, perfectly round, because Venus is one of those perfectly round planets.
Right.
There are not a lot of them. Every planet from outside of our orbit is squashed to a degree or to another. Venus is perfectly round. And to watch it cross across the sun's face now, taking a leisurely 6 hours to do so, it's just a wonderful event. And again, they happen 13 times in 1,000 years. Not very common. Transits of Mercury occur 13
right. times
a century. Very odd coincidence there where that number 13 comes in. Mercury transits 13 times a century. Venus 13 times a millennium. And
wow.
we're witnessing it right now.
I'll have to say. So one of the things I think we should talk about, Bob, in your book, The Sun's Heartbeat, let me give you some props for that, because it is a cool book. And everyone, if you haven't read it, you should. It's I actually bought this book for my dad for Christmas, and Bob signed it. Look, he even gave me a signed note to my dad, which is nice. But I did read it as well. And there was something, you had some interesting points on there. Why don't you talk about the whole thing about vitamin D, and your skin cancer and the issues that we're starting to realize that maybe we've gone overboard with suntan lotion. I know anyone that's been to a dermatologist is going to tell you otherwise. I frequently go, and they always tell me to load up on the UV protection. What is what is your take on that? Because that was kind of interesting in my mind.
Well, my take is now, having been persuaded by the vitamin D researchers on the Vitamin D Council and by other researchers who are so messianic and who are so rabid about this, because they're pulling out their hair that humans have changed from where we used to spend our days out in the sun. 100 years ago, we were an agrarian culture. We lived on farms. We spent all day out in the sun. Then we, of course, changed to an industrial culture where we're spending all our days indoors. But it's gotten worse than that. In the last 30 years, windows no longer open. In more and more offices, the windows are fixed. And ultraviolet rays will not go through glass. And so our skin will not make vitamin D through a window. Right. And because of this, the tested levels in our bloods of vitamin D are lower than they have ever been, and these researchers believe that nature planned for us to have high in continuing levels of vitamin D. And the proof of it, here's the proof. They say that if you spend a mere 20 minutes out in bright sunlight, that's not enough to burn you unless you're extremely fair. 20 minutes in sunlight will give you the same vitamin D as 200 glasses of milk. And they ask, why would nature do this that quickly? Why would nature produce that much vitamin D in that short a time? And the answer, the implied answer, is that we are meant to have high continuing levels of vitamin D, and we do not. So how do we pay for it? They think autism, cancer rates, because vitamin D is a known cancer preventer. And the only reason not to get more sunlight, of course, is what you said, Pat, that people are afraid of skin cancer. However, if you get lots of sun but don't burn, you are unlikely to get skin cancer. And secondly, most skin cancers, even though it's prevalent, are benign. The non-melanoma skin cancers, melanoma kills 8,000 people a year in the United States, but non-melanoma skin cancers, which 1 million people get, are absolutely benign. They can be easily treated. And so there's an excess scare about avoiding the sun. And they're very afraid of children because 30 years ago, 40 years ago, Pat, I don't know if you remember when you were a kid, didn't your mom let you play outside after school?
Oh, you know, it's funny because I grew up in Southern California, and, you know, I was at the beach frequently, and I never put on suntan lotion. I mean, we barely ever had it. And, you know, I was pretty tan back in the day.
That's right. But you know that these days, starting 30 years ago when that sexual predator scare came about, parents do not let their kids play outside. Playgrounds are often empty. And then came the Nintendo and video game craze, where kids wanted to be indoors after school. And then finally came the afraid of skin cancer craze, where parents slobber lotion over their kids before they'll let them out at all. And so the windup of this is that children test with extremely low levels of vitamin D as well. And you have to ask yourself, what is the consequence of having these young brains develop in the absence of natural sunlight, in the absence of vitamin D? And so these researchers are very, very afraid that we are becoming a race of underground people, mole people, and excessively avoiding the sun. I want to say that that doesn't mean you should stay out until you burn. A sunburn is not good for you. But you should get as much sun as you can without burning. That's the key. Stay out in the sun as much as you can without burning.
Right. Well, I know everyone's been, you know, some of the worst sunburns I've ever received actually is skiing, believe it or not. You know, skiing is one of those things that you do, you don't even think about wearing suntan lotion, and you go out and 6 hours later you're a lobster. So it's, but anyway, it's an interesting take because you know, every time I do go in and see my dermatologist, he has an opposite view, and perhaps with the, you know, as a parent of 2 small children, that's one of the things you worry about is when you do have children is autism, because it is on the rise, and you wonder, you know, no one really understands why that is. Maybe this is actually, you know, one of the reasons why.
Maybe, Pat. You know, it is a can of worms, of course, as soon as you bring it up, because people have different ideas about what may cause it, and it's still a mystery. However, the Vitamin D Council does point out that in sunny places like Somalia, autism is essentially unheard of in places where people still spend time outdoors and where the sun is high, whereas in Sweden, with their very low sun levels and their characteristic cloudiness, it has one of the highest rates, and that the rates do seem to march in sync with how much sunlight we get as children.
Right.
So
right.
it may be, and it may be one of the factors that can trigger autism is getting too little sunlight, being shielded from the sun excessively.
Right. Well, I just put out the invite to Dave Mosher, who's a science journalist. Hopefully he'll be joining us in a few minutes here. Bob, I'm just looking at our schedule here. How are you shaping up with your events? Are you going to be with us for a little while, or what's your schedule?
I'll be with you for a little while. We've got a nice crowd out there, but the sun is only peeking in and out, so I'll probably leave you when you have this next guest for 15 minutes or so, and then I'll come back on. I'll be able to focus totally with you. We have a beautiful crowd here at Mohonk Mountain House, and we got a little peek of sunlight before, and people were looking at the sun through their sun filters.
All right, cool. Well, Bob, we'll see you in about 15 minutes, so please do come back.
Okay, good, good.
All right, buddy.
I'll see you then.
Hey, Dave, how you doing, buddy?
Pretty good. How are you? Can you read me?
Yeah, we're looking good. You're looking good. Everything's working well.
Excellent.
We're just looking at some live feeds here on Slooh. Let me give you a little intro, Dave.
Sure.
Dave Mosher is a science journalist who contributes to Wired and freelances for Nat Geo News, Popular Mechanics, The Technologist, Scientific American, and other science outlets. He's covered the NASA Space Shuttle program for Florida and Texas. He's flown over the North Pole to catch a total solar eclipse, which we got to hear about. And he once lived in a house full of Russian particle physicists. Oh my goodness! And he survived. Wow, that's very
I did
good.
survive. You know, my brain didn't explode or anything like that. So.
Great. So, Dave, here we are. We're getting our feeds rolling across with Slooh. We got feeds coming in from Australia, Norway, New Mexico, Arizona, and have you had a chance yet to look and see any of it yet, or what have you seen thus far?
You know, my dog's in the background there. I don't know if you can see her, but
oh.
I was running around outside with this tube. It's actually in the kitchen. I go grab it, but I don't want to step away from my computer. You know, with foil on top of it, with the pinhole, and I was just running around the neighborhood trying to walk the dog, pick up dog poop and look at the Venus transit. But it didn't work out too well because it's really cloudy here. The clouds are in and out. So the image, it's really tiny.